Hi, I'm Femi Okay.
I'm Malika Bilal, and this is Loveland Anderson, an American Sign Language interpreter.
Now, Lovely will be translating our discussion today. We are talking about people with disabilities in the United States and how the Trump administration's proposed healthcare reforms might affect them. Stay with us.
I'm retired United States Senator Tom Harkin, and I've devoted my retirement to working on employment for people with disabilities, and I'm in the screen.
Since entering the White House, U.S. President Donald Trump has focused on undoing the work of his predecessor, Barack Obama. Among his priorities, healthcare reform, repealing so-called Obamacare. The U.S. House of Representatives recently helped him by passing a reform bill.
This is a great plan. I actually think it will get even better. And this is, make no mistake, this is a repeal and a replace of Obamacare. Make no mistake about it.
It's not actually a replacement of Obamacare. The Senate still has to debate and approve its own version of the bill. The U.S. health system is a complicated mix of private insurance companies and government-funded support called Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare helps 55 million older Americans and certain young people with disabilities. Medicaid is a social health care program paying for 66 million people with limited resources. Now, together, they insure about 1/3 of the country. Combined, they cost almost a quarter of federal spending. And some, like President Trump and the Republican Party, say it's cost the government too much. But what are the human costs of reform? That's what Americans with disabilities are worried about. With us to talk about this, we have Patrice Lee Onwuka, a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. In Winston, South Carolina, Vilissa Thompson is a disability rights consultant and writer. And in Pittsburgh, New York, Andrew Porang is a disability rights advocate who helps spearhead the hashtag and the movement called Crip the Vote. And in Morriston, New Jersey, Elsa Shunesson Henry is an author and disability activist. Hello, everybody. It's good to have you here. So, worries, I'm thinking, Vilissa, when you heard about the legislation on its way to the Senate for healthcare reform, your initial response was what?
I was frightened because I knew that it could be one step further to get it enacted. In our community, and myself included, we are so worried about us and what will happen to disabled people who rely on essential resources like personal care assistance. Those who are afraid that if they do not have health insurance, that they have to go back into institutions or be institutionalized. So really the freedoms that we have as disabled people are literally in jeopardy now that the bill has moved from the House to the Senate. And everyone is worried. There are people who are saying that if this bill passed, I can die. So this is the reality for us at this moment.
So I'm just wondering, Vilissa, is this about fears or about certainty?
This is certainty. There is certainty that many disabled people will be gravely disadvantaged to the point to where many will possibly be institutionalized or possibly die if certain resources and services are not covered by Medicaid, if the states do not have the funding to pay for the resources, if there are other insurance outlets that they utilize do not have the funding, or if their conditions are considered to be at high risk and they cannot meet the premiums to pay those services and support that they need. It is certainty that many of us would be in a grave situation where our very livelihoods will be affected.
Right. So I hear that certainty in your voice. People online are saying something much similar. Here's just a few tweets. This is CIDNY, the organization. Medicaid saves lives and keeps people out of institutions for their entire lives. So we've been talking about Medicaid, and that is, just to refresh your memory for our international audience, a government program that compensates healthcare providers, and it's cheaper than getting private insurance. So on that issue, this is what Dominic writes in. We don't have the luxury of just buying insurance if we need home health care. Medicaid is our only option. He goes on to give an example. Home health care does things like get me out of bed and help me go to the bathroom. I need it to survive. Elsa, can you pick up here on this story and on the home health care and how that's related and what losing it might mean?
Well, there are people who live in situations like Dominic who don't have the ability to lead a fully independent life without assistance. And we can't fail people because they are not leading lives that society expects us to.
Let me just bring in Andrew. Andrew, when we're looking at this in terms of healthcare reform, what's the reform bit? What is getting better?
It's unclear to me what is actually getting better. I think the rhetoric is that by, in a couple of different ways, cutting Medicaid and also isolating out people with disabilities from the rest of the system, that somehow that's going to make it cheaper for everyone else. Again, I'm characterizing as best I can what the proponents are saying. I don't agree. Number one, I don't agree it will work. And number two, even if it worked, I don't think that's necessarily the right thing to do.
I'm looking at what might possibly be different between, let's just use the nicknames, Obamacare to Trumpcare. What are the big differences that you're seeing that you see are issues?
Okay, well, the one that's the most prominent right now is being discussed is how it treats people with pre-existing conditions, which you could basically say is the same as people with disabilities, plus others who have other medical conditions. And pre-existing means you have a medical condition before you sign up for health insurance. Most people, when they get health insurance, have no conditions. They're not sick, and so health insurance can kind of take a chance that they won't cost very much. Those of us who have already had conditions or have disabilities, the companies already know that we're going to cost probably more, and that's why they want to treat us differently, either by simply not covering us or by charging us a lot more for the coverage. So under Obamacare, companies could no longer refuse to cover us, and they could not charge us more for a health insurance policy than other people. Under Trumpcare, if you will, they're kind of fudging it now and kind of saying that they're still doing that, but they're leaving a lot more leeway to states to let companies charge more for people with disabilities, people with pre-existing conditions. That's one big one. The other big one is planned cuts to Medicaid by scaling back the Medicaid expansion that happened under Obamacare, and simply by making it used to be, it's now an entitlement where you get what you need based on your medical need. They want to make it a capped program and a block granted program where every state gets a certain amount of money and that's all you get. And they just hope that it will be enough to cover the people. So it would no longer be you get what you need based on your medical condition. It would be based on how well your state is doing this year. You know? And that's a real problem for people like us who are saying, well, my condition hasn't changed. I still need the home care or hospitalization or whatever. Just because more people than expected had needs, why should my medical care suffer?
So I hear you in discussing those differences. I wanted to share a video comment we got from someone named Kia Brown. Kia talks about intersectionality, and that's a word that our online community knows well, but it's the different boxes that one checks and how this might affect those people who have lots of different boxes to check. So this is Kia Brown. This is what she tells us.
Hi, my name is Kia Brown, and I am a journalist and a writer. Disabled people stand to lose so much under the repeal of the ACA. We will lose funding with Medicaid and Medicare, and we will, at the end of the day, not be able to pay for the medications that we need in order to survive. We will not be able to pay for home care, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and so much more. I think at the end of the day, it's all about livelihood, and we won't have the chance to live well. And also, disabled people of color and people in the LGBTQ community, especially disabled people of color in the LGBTQ community, stand to lose so much under this new Health Care Act.
So Vailissa, she has a lot of fears there. Can you speak to any of them? And in particular, do you think that there are more fears or more concerns for, as she puts it, people of color or members of the LGBT community that weren't there, perhaps, under quote-unquote Obamacare?
Oh, yes, definitely. As a Black disabled woman, I know Kia Brown very well, and she is definitely correct. Those of us who are multiply marginalized, those of color, those who are LGBT, and those who are of color and LGBT and disabled, healthcare services are already hard to attain due to medicalized racism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, as it is. But when you add to the fact that with the pending changes, if this bill is passed, those resources could become more scarce. It could be harder for disabled people of color, those who are LGBT, to find medical care that really takes in their needs, to see them as a whole person. It's already hard enough to find resources that really treat you as a human being, to really see you who you are and take your healthcare needs seriously. There are already great disparities that racial minorities and those LGBT endure, but when you add disability to that mix, those disparities are heightened. So yes, Kia is very correct. Disabled people of color and those who are LGBT and those who are within both margins will be gravely impacted by this bill, and the lack of assistance and support that they may be able to access may go away or be very dwindled, particularly for those who live in rural areas like myself here in South Carolina, to where those resources are already scarce due to access, due to transportation barriers, due to me living in the state of South Carolina. We did not expand Medicaid. So to live in southern states like South Carolina and other states did not even expand Medicaid under Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act to have these possible block grants that will be a set amount of money, and these states may run out of money. They may decide, oh, we are really stretching our budget, and for this year we may have to not allow people on the road or really limit who gets certain services. So this is a very real reality for those of us who are multiple marginalized.
I want to bring in Patrice, who has a more optimistic view of this healthcare reform. Patrice, but I'm going to do that via a tweet that Elsa tweeted out. So Elsa says, please don't let them do this to me. Please don't let them take away my healthcare. Please don't let them punish me for being born disabled. Patrice? How do you respond to that?
My heart goes out to Elsa. It's being born disabled is a difficult situation to be in. It certainly doesn't limit her abilities to achieve lots, but when we look at the ACA and we look at the AHCA, or what is supposed to be really just the repeal of the ACA, the idea is behind it by those who drafted it is to keep what was working in the ACA, but then reform it so that the higher premiums that everyone is experiencing, the higher deductibles that so many people are experiencing as well, no longer become a hardship. Now, for those who are disabled, those who have had pre-existing conditions, I think the idea behind some of the revisions, including the MacArthur Amendment to the repeal bill, is to ensure that you will not be denied coverage
Patrice,
if you have a pre-existing condition.
What that is for our international audience watching who may not be deeply into healthcare in the United States, but are intrigued about what's going on right now?
Absolutely. So, we're familiar with, for the past 6 years, Republicans, conservatives have, really campaigned to repeal the current Obamacare, the bill known as Obamacare. And so what we have right now, recently the House passed a repeal bill, and in it are lots of different provisions, some of which will scale back some of the healthcare taxes, will institute some different cost savings that are meant to kind of cut back or decrease the cost for providing Obamacare, and then some of the provisions, and mostly some of those that were added recently, are meant to protect the things that lots of Americans support, like ensuring that if you have a pre-existing condition, it may be a sickness and illness, that it does not keep you from being able to get health care coverage.
Okay, hold tight for a moment. So this term pre-existing condition, I think it's quite a loaded one and people understand it in different ways. Andrew, how do you understand that term?
Well, literally, again, as I said before, my understanding is that literally means a condition, a medical condition that you had prior to signing up for insurance. Um, but and I equate it in a way, and we equate it in a way with disability in the sense that, by and large, if you have a disability that's going to be considered a pre-existing condition, that is if it's happened before you signed up for health insurance. Does that clear it up?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there are probably other definitions
Yeah.
that you could talk about, but in a practical sense, that's what it means. In
So-
other words, the insurance company meets you for the first time. They already know that you've got MS or that you are deaf or that you have autism or whatever. They would like to be able to charge you more or perhaps not cover you at all because they feel that, chances are you're going to be more expensive.
So I wanted to share this from Mia on Twitter, who does understand that there were problems with the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. Mia says, I think, yes, there were problems with it, so fix those problems. The ACA was a first draft. It can be made to work for the people. The Senate needs to look at what's working and what's not and use the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare as a guideline to create a better healthcare system that works for all people. Now, I know there will be differing opinions on this, but Patrice, do you think that that is what House representatives here in the US were doing, using it as a guideline, or was it more about starting from scratch?
No, I don't think they do. I think House representatives, and like many conservatives, think that the ACA was fundamentally flawed. It was broken from the start. And as a result, while you may have on paper an increased number of Americans who have health care coverage, i.e. a health care insurance card that they can take somewhere, it didn't necessarily deliver on promises to ensure that someone can go find a doctor, go to a doctor, and get the care that they need and could afford to do so. And those are some significant issues. When you look at the 25% increase in just the monthly payment someone has to make to keep their coverage, that's a hardship. When you consider that the amount that you have to meet an out-of-pocket cost, I mean, that could be, when you have to pay a deductible, when you have to pay, to meet a certain amount before your coverage kicks in, so to speak, that's also a hardship. Now, I want to acknowledge that there are millions of people who have received coverage, particularly through the Medicare program. But what's interesting and what is not told is that these Americans qualified for that coverage before the ACA went into existence. That just was not known. And with this repeal bill, at least 3/4 of those folks will continue to qualify for that coverage.
3/4, that's very honest of you. Elsa, what Patrice is saying, do you think that it accurately reflects what people with disabilities are going to have to deal with? Is the money argument, is that the strongest argument for why healthcare has to be reformed? Because it's just not affordable for so many people.
Well, healthcare wasn't affordable before the ACA for people with disabilities. That's the truth. My health care was exorbitantly expensive before the ACA was put into place. And now, even with insurance that is required to cover pre-existing conditions, I still have parts of my disability that aren't covered by insurance. As someone with hearing loss, I have a hearing aid. Hearing aids are not covered by insurance in my state. So I have to pay out of pocket for my hearing aid. I have to pay out of pocket for my prosthetic eye. And that's with the ACA. So yes, there are problems. But the problem is these things should be covered by insurance. These things shouldn't be put to the side and said, no, you have to pay out of pocket for the items that make your life livable in a medical sense. And I want to make that very clear. The medical costs of being disabled are very high. And as a result, the fact that the ACA has lessened some of that burden is a positive. If we can make it so that even less money is being spent out of pocket by people with disabilities in this country, all the better.
So I like that you said that, because I want to posit something else to you. This is Maysoon Zayed, really picking up on what you said about the problems of it. But on top of all of that, Maysoon Zayed says people with disabilities are missing from the writers of legislation to the commentators on the news, so they're not part of this conversation. Elsa, I know that you actually spoke to your representatives. You went to their doors. You're planning to go see your senators as well. Do you think that this is part of the problem?
Absolutely. I went down to D.C. last month, and on April 5th, I talked to my representative about my concerns about his vote on health care. Representative Frelinghuysen was saying that he supported people with disabilities. He, in fact, told a woman who is a survivor of breast cancer that he would protect her rights to her health care, and I believe that health care is a right and not a privilege. But we have to hear from people like me. We have to hear from people like everybody who's on this call who has a disability. Everyone who is a constituent should be heard by their representatives, and we're not full participants in this process. Telephone town halls shut people who are deaf and hard of hearing out of the conversation. If we can't get in the door to somebody's office, maybe we're not being heard. We need to be equal and full participants in this dialogue, or else we're not going to get the things we need. So our representatives need to listen to us. Our senators need to listen to us. But also, we need to be voted into office. We need to run for office. We need to be part of the government process.
Let me just share with you a clip here from President Trump. It was on the passage of the Affordable Care Act replacement bill following the House vote. So that was about a week ago. I want you to look at the president, but also look at the people behind him. Have a listen.
And I think most importantly, yes, premiums will be coming down. Yes, deductibles will be coming down. But very importantly, it's a great plan. And ultimately, that's what it's all about. We knew that wasn't going to work. I predicted it a long time ago. I said it's failing. And now it's obvious that it's failing. It's dead. It's essentially dead. If we don't pay lots of ransom money over to the insurance companies, it would die immediately. So what we have is something very, very incredibly well-crafted. Tell you what, there is a lot of talent standing behind me, an unbelievable amount of talent. That I can tell you. I mean it.
Unbelievable amount of talent, well-crafted. Andrew, you were shaking your head as you were watching that video clip. I'm just wondering about the consultation process. This conversation that we're having, coming from different perspectives, it's obvious that a lot of what you're saying is not getting to lawmakers. Why not?
Well, I mean, I think this goes back a long time, and some of it's natural. I mean, lawmakers, by and large, don't really understand how health insurance works for people with disabilities. I think a lot of them don't understand how it works, period. You know, that's part of it. And I just think that our concerns usually are still considered kind of a niche concern that only a few specialized lawmakers really bothered to learn about. I mean, one example is it kind of goes to fundamental issues. You know, a lot of times you'll hear people talk about health insurance in a way as something that you get after you have achieved some success in life, that it's almost like a reward that you get good health insurance as part of your having gotten educated and having a good job. The thing with people with disabilities is it's the other way around. We can't achieve independence and productivity unless we have health insurance. And it's a fundamental reversal of the way people often still usually look at health insurance. So that's a fundamental misunderstanding right there. And again, I want to refer back to the point about Medicaid and the idea that, well, you know, all of you or most of you were covered by Medicaid already. It is true that Medicaid certainly pre-existed Obamacare, and lots of people with disabilities were on it before Obamacare.
Sure.
But Medicaid expansion enabled more people with disabilities and more people who aren't disabled to use that health insurance.
All right, Andrew, I appreciate your take, and also Julia and Vailisa and Elsa and Patrice as well for being part of this program. Malika, where do you want to leave us?
I'll leave us with this tweet from Lindsay, who says, it seems a lot of politicians think we're exaggerating when we say healthcare is life or death for many people with disabilities or disabled people. We're not.
Let me just leave you with an image here on my laptop. This is a snapshot of disability in the United States. 22% of adults in the United States have some type of disability. This is a debate that's going to go on for some time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Our conversation continues online using the hashtag AJStreet.